Hey, this video is intended to show you how to do a quick nav bar using the unordered list item in HTML. And so what I've done is cleaned up the HTML from all the previous lessons on lists and that sort of thing, and I'm going back to basics. So in my body, I have HTML, and I'm sorry, yeah, I have some HTML in my body here that has two separate ULs. One is sitting within a nav. I'm going to promote that to the top there. I use the shift tab in brackets to move that block up. And then I have UL and LI in here. You notice that each one of those has some different characteristics to them. So let's let's treat the UL down below as the list items that would appear in an article or something like that. And then this UL is going to be inside the nav. So what I want to do right away is distinguish from, other ULs by making sure that I can see my nav first. And I'm going to put a border of 1 pixel, and I'll do a solid dark gray around that one. Okay? And so this is where my nav is going to go. And my nav bar has 4 items, and they're all list items. So let me style the nav. I'm going to style the UL within the nav, and I'm going to style the LI within each one of those ULs. And I'm going to do a list dash style, and I'm going to make this none. All right. What that does is it takes away all of the list styling here. Notice whenever I type this in, I get suggestions for list style image, list style position, and list style type. And so you can really mess around with where these dots are located and what they look like, and you can even add in your own image there, and that's kind of cool. But for now, what I'm going to do, because we're paying attention to how UL is created with the nav, we're going to just leave the list style as none. The other thing that I want to do with this nav is that this space tends to have a lot of padding in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the padding down to 0 on the nav. Okay. And even though it didn't make any difference, it gives me another control to use. And then I'm also going to do the same thing with the nav UL. So nav and then UL, right? And by doing so, I can also change my padding in there and really understand where my extra space is coming from. In the box model, you only have padding and margin that would add extra space that wouldn't be visible, right? So between those two, you can really get a more fine tune on the items that you're changing, okay? So now I have a list style of none, and I have this list in place. You notice that there's some margin here left. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a margin of 0. And then that resets essentially my box for the nav. And I'm also going to put that margin of 0 on the nav as well. All right. So I have a margin and a padding of 0 on the nav. I have the margin and padding of 0 on the UL. And I have a list style of none on the list item. Here's where it gets fun. Remember that we started to use, instead of a display of block, we're going to change the display for this nav to inline dash block. Right? And what that does, that allows us to have these items falling in line as a nav bar. Okay. Now, this is so cool, right? One of the things that we can do here is we can really play around with some more advanced CSS that can do some fun things. And so let's do this. I have this nav UL ULI, and I have just duplicated this. I'm going to blank out the rest of the properties in here, and I'm going to use a pseudo selector called after. And in order to do that, it even tripped me up first time. So I have a list item, and then it's going to be a list item after each one of these. This might be a little bit advanced, but I want to show it to you anyway. We are going to do anything that's after a list item. I'm going to increase the space just after a list item. So I'm going to put a padding of right for a list after of 5 pixels. Let's see if it takes it. Didn't seem like it did much of it. Let's do 50 pixels. Still didn't really do it. Well, golly. All right, so some things that we try don't exactly work the way we want to. So I'm just gonna undo it. You know what? I don't need to deal with that right now. I'm gonna be okay just the way it is, because what we have are these list items that we can kind of blow up and make into buttons of their own. So I wanted to try and be a little bit more specific with the padding. I'm not worried about that at the moment. So let's make these a little bit larger. I'm going to make a margin of, let's say, 10 pixels all around. And so that's going to give us lots of space to work with. I want them to spread out a little bit, so I am going to do a padding of about 8 pixels on each of these as well. So that gives us things that kind of look buttony now. And we're going to do a border on each of these of a 1 pixel, and we'll do a solid, and we'll do a CCC on those. Okay. All right. And so now we have the makings of sort of a wireframed little HTML nav bar here. What this also means is that I can use these LIs as boxes of their own, and so I could put a background color on these. And for the background color for these buttons, I want to do something kind of contrasty. So I'm going to actually make these very dark, and I'll use a 111 as our background color, which means that my text disappears essentially. You can barely see the text in there. So let's change the color of the text to something that contrasts that very well. I'm going to go E. All right. And so now I have a nav bar that has some buttons, button-looking items on there. And you can style this however you would like to, but I'm showing you that when you style the LI, it's going to only style the list item. What I could also do, potentially, is style just the UL, right? So the UL has its own background color properties, and I can either make these identical to the ones below, or I can make them a different color. For illustration purposes, I'm going to make these a standard dark gray, okay? And so that gives me a background color to work with in this space. And so this is what my overall item looks like. Notice one other thing. Goodness, if you are as particular about things as I am, you will see that there's still a border around this outer box, right? So I have my buttons, boom, 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 boom. Those are all my 4 buttons. And then I have this box around here. And man, I just don't want that to be there. So what I want to do is come back up to the nav, and let's leave well enough alone. We'll take that little nav guy out of there. And so now I have a kind of mocked up nav bar that can be styled in all sorts of various ways. Okay. So what this also means is that you can copy and use this to your heart's content as far as moving it into different pages. But the best part about this is if you are using the nav element, then you are only styling one piece of HTML, and that leaves the rest of the ULs to be styled independently of those, and it doesn't ruin any of your body text that you might bring into this space. So hope this helps. Lots of fun to be had, and we'll continue on with more HTML and CSS soon. Bye-bye.